what we mean by mediation in the context of New Orleans and what our goals for a mediation program would be. Today we're going to continue that discussion and try to drill down to some measurable goals that we could use to evaluate the program. So today the agenda specifically is we're going to do a brief check-in with each other for 10 minutes. Then we're going to wrap up our discussion of the definition of mediation and revisit our principles. Then we'll spend about half an hour talking about the resources that already exist here in New Orleans. Heather and Simone have done some research, and Lou has also joined us as one of the mediators who are working here in New Orleans today. Then we're going to finish our discussion about project outcomes. And if we have time, we're going to get into inclusion-exclusion criteria. So these charts that are on every other chair and that big chart back there are the proposed inclusion-exclusion criteria. If we get to it, we're going to just do a first go-round dot vote, which is like put a dot by your favorite one, your second favorite one, and one that you absolutely don't want. And we're just going to see what kind of consensus we have, assuming we get that far in the discussion. So let's start by reminding everyone of who we are. And if y'all could do a little report back on any questions or concerns your constituency has about these meetings and the program that might result from it. So let's start.
My name is Lou Furman, and I'm Executive Director for Community Mediation Services. We've been in the area since 1994. Do you want more detail on that or later?
I was hoping when we discussed the current resources, you would fill this in. Cool.
And I have 4 grandchildren and a mom.
Congratulations.
Okay. I'm Susan Norwood, and this is my first meeting. I'm a mediator and restorative practitioner. I work through AFCC, which is the Association for Family Reconciliation Courts, also with Lou at Community Mediation Services. I'm interested in this project because of the restorative aspects or the transformative aspects as far as mediation is concerned.
Hi, my name is Mary Special. I'm a sister of the presentation, and I chose this comfy couch as a way to be here this afternoon. I am passionate about young people and working with young people. I'm a resident of Central City. Presently, I work with Community Development Corporation in housing, but probably my real passion is young adults and really trying to give them opportunities. So this problems that they face today are overwhelming, but this is, I'm glad to be here to be part of the solution.
Patrick Walsh. I'm representing in this organization the Young Leadership Council, which is the building that you're in right now, so welcome. The Young Leadership Council is about a 26-year-old organization. The goal is to develop leadership through volunteerism. We have a number of projects up here. There's about between 10 to 15 projects going on at any time, all kind of related to different aspects of the city. There's some that focus on education, there's some that focus on crime. We also have a concert series, so there's a number of different things that they do. In my real job, I'm the Executive Director of the Office of School Performance for the Recovery School District, so I do charter oversight.
I'm Al Grandois. I have a background in mediation, mediation work in Massachusetts, and I currently work at the Justice Center.
I'm Cassie Pearson. I coordinate the legal clinic at Common Ground Relief. I have a background in law from California. I'm not practicing here.
Did y'all? I'm Heather Siegel. I'm a law clerk with the police monitor and working on mediation program and very excited to be part of it all.
My name is Maya Terrence. I'm the administrative assistant for the Office of Independent Police Monitor.
I'm James Riley, and I'm also a law clerk with the Independent Police Monitor.
I'm Mary Lundstedt. I work with Rethink, Kids Rethink in Women's Schools, and I work with the Restorative Justice group, so it's different people who are advocating for restorative discipline in their schools.
Simon Holbrook, the president of Black Population Police.
Hi, my name is Eva Person Martin. I worked at Catholic Charities for the last 7 years around working with Hispanics, doing outreach with the Hispanic Latino community, mainly focusing on victims and witnesses of crime and building a better relationship with local law enforcement and encouraging them to report crime and serving as an interpreter and a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. No longer with Catholic Charities, but I'm here as a community member. I'm still involved and still doing the work, and just feel like I laid so much groundwork. I hate to abandon it, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Jenny Hunter. I'm with the Business Council of New Orleans, and the Business Council is very much committed to helping solve the crisis of crime in our community, and this plays a nice role in that. So,
I'm Michael Cowan with Common Good at Loyola University, and I'm here representing the New Orleans Crime Coalition.
I'm Simone Levine. I'm the deputy police monitor in our very small 4-person shop. I wanted to just put in a couple of thank yous before we go any further. I want to put a very strong thank you in for both of our interns who really work themselves very hard to actually put together this program and other work. Also, my interns, Susan Hudson's assistant, is just really excellent, and we couldn't do our work without her. And Ursula Price, also, who is moderating today and has moderated. She just does an excellent job with everything she does. And lastly, I want to thank Patrick for providing the space to us. The parking is so much better, and it's a really great space. We really appreciate it. And I think that we have one more person that just walked in.
My name is Mike Glasser, the Police Association of New Orleans.
I'm Allison Curry. I'm just a community member, volunteer with the Independent Police Monitor. My background is in criminal justice, and I have a master's in conflict management and negotiations.
That's just been a great help to us and a real resource. So we have a really rich discussion planned for today. Simone recently went to a conference where she learned a lot from other police monitors' offices around the country. Heather's been doing a lot of research. So if no one objects, we're going to jump right in. Cool. So the first thing on our agenda is I wanted to continue our discussion of defining mediation. And before we did that, I thought we could revisit the principles that we talked about on the first day we ever met. If you picked up the handouts, you should have a document that looks like this. It says page 14 in the top right-hand corner. And somewhere in the upper middle of the page, it says principles.
Yeah.
Officer Glasser, if you'd like to come into the circle, that'd be great. Captain Glasser, if you'd like to come into the circle, that'd be great, so everyone can see your face and you can see it.
I think I have a spot.
Sure. Now, the reason why I'm bringing these principles back up is because we adopted them coming back when we first started. I'm assuming that everyone's still good with these principles, but now would be the time to raise any discussions if you have concerns about any of them. But I'm also asking us all to revisit these so that they can guide our decisions around goals and benchmarks. So just to briefly reread them, the first principle was that mediation is voluntary. Simone's going to present some information about other jurisdictions where officers don't have a choice about mediation and the pros and cons of that. Second principle, ensure that mediation is confidential. Third, that we offer bilingual mediators and translators. 4, that mediation is for issues that meet inclusion criteria that we will decide later. Mediation does not replace police accountability. This is not a replacement for the officer disciplinary system. We clearly explain the mediation outcomes to everyone involved. We provide officer incentives to participate. We deliver the program with trained mediators. We recognize recognize the power differential between civilians and police officers, and we record the success of mediation. In other words, we set up evaluation criteria and we keep records to be able to see if we're achieving our goals. So question one, is there anyone who has any concerns about continuing to be guided by these principles? Okay, cool. So since these are our principles, let's remember that as we discuss the definition of mediation. Now, Simone did some work to come up with a proposed definition of mediation. Is that what we did? Okay. So Simone, yeah, why don't you read it and I'll scribe.
Well, I'm just gonna give you a copy. Well, what's easier for you? I'll read it out loud for people.
Thank you. Much more say than liquor. Shoot.
Yeah, what's in here? Just give me a minute.
While we're down, pause, did everyone get a chance to study? Yeah.
I'm gonna just pull it up on my Blackberry. Basically, what I attempted to do in writing the mediation definition is to include the criteria that everybody had said that they wanted to have included.
Yeah, so y'all might remember from our last meeting, we identified phrases that we had consensus around. And if I were smart, I would have brought those phrases with me. But they are in the notes from the last meeting. So Simone took those notes and tried to make those phrases into a sentence.
Two of them were mutual understanding and mutual accountability.
Thank you.
Once it's set up.
That's why you have interns to do all.
Okay, a mediator seeks to help parties develop a mutual understanding, a mutual accountability over a conflict, to work toward building a practical and lasting resolution.
A mutual understanding.
Mutual understanding and mutual accountability over a conflict, and to work toward building a practical and lasting resolution.
Thank you, Doctor. To develop
Mutual understanding and mutual accountability over a conflict. I'm sorry. A mediator seeks to help parties develop a mutual understanding and mutual accountability over a conflict, and to work toward building a practical and lasting resolution.
Okay.
options that help the parties reach mutually beneficial resolution. And there's one more sentence.
Generates options to.
Generate options that help the parties reach a mutually beneficial resolution. And the idea of not giving you guys this in front of you was intentional, actually. We just felt we were giving you guys too much paper.
Okay, what's the next sentence?
You got mutually beneficial resolution, right? So the last sentence is, the agreed upon resolution reached at the end of a mediation session may not necessarily represent a final decision, but may be part of the process toward building a larger, and lasting solution. And let me just also say that this was taken, there's a little bit of repetition in here, but one of the reasons why there's a little bit of repetition is because the intent is that the whole definition can stay together as a three-sentenced definition, or it can be separate and people can agree to separate sentences. The way that we got to this definition, it was created by myself with a lot of input from everybody else on the team, was we took all the terms that everybody had agreed to that they wanted included, and we made it into a definition. And those terms were mutual understanding, mutual beneficial resolution, mutual accountability, and then there was also information. There was also language which included evaluation standards, and we had initially included evaluation standards in this definition, but then we had taken it out because we thought that we would have something separate that would go deeper into the understanding of what types of standards and what types of evaluation criteria we would need. So for example, the group had mentioned that they wanted to have language outlining the role of mediator or facilitator, which includes standards and evaluation criteria, and also promote empathy, including post-mediation standards of action and follow-up. So what we decided to do is, instead of actually including that in a set definition for mediation, we thought that we would include that in something larger that related to evaluation criteria. So how successful the mediation program would be later on, how we could actually make that determination. And there was one other term, I'm sorry, yeah, that's it.
So it's those three?
Yep.
So what we have here are three sentences. What I'm proposing, and I'm open to discussion about this, is that first we just take a straight up and down vote on each of the three sentences. And if we seek consensus, then it's done. If there's conflict, then we have further discussion.
May I ask a question before we do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And I apologize if maybe this was already discussed. Is there elsewhere a definition of a mediator?
It really depends. There are different definitions of mediator, and
But I mean, are you intending to have elsewhere a definition?
so the order of our decision making, I think is what you're asking, is that yes, after, first we did principles, then we do goals, then we do benchmarks, then we do inclusion exclusion criteria, then we decide on what our standards for mediator are.
Oh, excuse me, I wasn't being clear, I'm sorry. This defines the mediator's role as well as the definition of what happens during a mediation. And I think those are two distinct things. So I would be more comfortable said elsewhere.
I got you. So you're saying basically this first sentence needs to be its own thing? Right. Yes, sir.
Addressing what she's raising at that first sentence, instead of saying maybe a mediator, maybe the mediation process seeks to help parties develop.
Yeah,
something
that
like that.
makes
Yeah.
Do we have consensus on that? Any objections? Okay.
And, just, I think the people are already doing it, which is great, but the whole entire point of putting together this definition is just that so people can add things and take things away. The only issue that really, it comes down to is that the group is supportive of the additions or the detractions.
And I'm just change like from seeks to like bring together, because,
Brings
brings
people together to
or
help?
bring parties or individuals, because however the word you want to choose, but as opposed to seeks, it's not necessarily seeking out something, it's bringing the parties together to achieve the end result.
Helps parties develop.
Develop it, yeah.
Okay, so just taking out the seeks to help.
Seeks to help.
Okay.
Seeks to.
Hi, Wes. Do you want to introduce yourself to folks?
My name is Wes. I'm Wes, I'm the director of Breakout. And we work with LGBT youth in New Orleans.
And do any of your constituents have any questions or concerns about this process at this point?
To be honest with you, we have not talked all through this, so members know that it's going on, but we haven't had a chance to go through sort of all the nuts and bolts.
Did the clothes work out?
Actually, didn't need them, but they're in my car.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this is the right time for that, but just want to raise one question about mutually beneficial resolution. I think that's what that is right now. I'm not sure if something should be added. I guess what I'm thinking, I'm mutually beneficial or mutually acceptable. It may be both of those.
I agree, usually acceptable is better, correct.
Right. So that we're not deciding what's good for other folks, but
Right.
whatever they say.
Well, the process, I mean, they just may say, you know what, I can live with it. So it might not be that they feel that it's beneficial. I mean, you hope that positive,
Right.
but you
But
can
at
be
least
left
they can
with
accept
something
it.
that's just acceptable.
Yeah.
Is we got consensus
So
on that?
maybe it's or, mutually beneficial or should it just be acceptable?
I think mutually
Just acceptable.
acceptable is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if people have strong feelings to the contrary, make sure that you also speak up, because what we're doing here is we are editing it, and so we want to make sure that we have the consensus from the group.
Is that ABO or ABO? ABO. Spelling is not my strength.
And similarly, for the beginning of sentence 2, if it could say, the parties identify disputed issues and generate options, or in the process, disputed issues and options are identified, or the mediator does not do those things.
Right.
So what was your
I would
suggestion?
say the parties identify.
Just to go back a little bit, Ursula,
Yes, sir.
not to actuate it, something
No, this is
we've
what it's
already
supposed to be.
addressed, but as opposed to acceptable, straightforward to the point, simplistic, but there's no, draw too much in different words. Just, I would say mutually agreed upon resolution.
Maybe that's even better.
And it's just mutually agreed upon resolution, so it doesn't leave any open air to what's acceptable, what's not, what's beneficial, what's not.
I take a little exception to that because I'm imagining that we could have an outcome that both the officer and the citizen find acceptable, but that they don't agree on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Then it doesn't make, there isn't an agreement, then it doesn't make its way to the resolution.
Well, for instance, they could have we've done conciliation discussions, right? Where the officer states his position, the citizen states their position. They don't actually agree on what was right or wrong, but they are accepting the other person's position and satisfied with that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's weird.
So the officer says, I have to cuff people for safety. And the citizen says, I do anything wrong and you hurt my wrist. And they both feel fine just saying their position. So that's why I'm raising this. Are we okay with having two people feel fine about the process but not reaching an agreement?
Yeah, but it doesn't, like that two statement doesn't reach the level of resolution. It says that's the mediation process, when they're coming to that point of resolution. Okay, I have the handcuff. Okay, I felt blah, 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 and we had the handcuff. So now, through that process, we're gonna get to that resolution. That's agreed upon, whether it's, apology, whatever, that's what I'm saying. So, that makes sense.
No, I mean, is the idea to have a written contract or agreement at the end of this process? Is that what we're calling the resolution? It seems like we need to.
That is an option that we have yet to make a decision about.
And the tricky process right now is really trying to sort of keep those options open and make sure that your definition is able to fulfill or support the options that you think are the right ones, since we haven't actually come up with any of those ways.
I kind of follow what you're saying about the agreed upon resolution, but I'm not sure if, let's say we disagree on some of the facts of the incident. There's some kind of disagreement there. And I might say, you know what? The citizen, what are you asking for in this process? What are you looking for? Okay, you know what? I don't really agree with you, but I can live with this resolution that you're proposing. So, yes, I can agree with the resolution, but I don't really agree with everything that's in there. And I'm not sure I would be okay with the term agree. And maybe it doesn't matter, I'm not really sure, whatever maybe the majority say, I'm not sure. You have a thought on that, Mike?
Yeah, I
I think acceptable just leaves more flexibility there. I follow what you're saying, but I think acceptable leaves more flexibility. It's not as definitive.
Well, the only thing with that is like, the goal of mediation, I know we're running slightly different hat because of the group and the parties that's going to be in play. But the ultimate goal, when you bring the two parties together, is to get to that agreed upon resolution. So we walk away at the table, whether or not the facts are in dispute is what brings us into the mediation.
So that's part of the discussion. The third sentence might be speaking of what you're talking about, because the third sentence implies that we might not resolve in the mediation, but the mediation must be a step towards resolution, right? So it may be that the actual mediation itself is not a resolution. How do we feel about that? Like, how do we feel about sentence number 2 meaning that sentence number 3?
I like sentence number 3 personally, because it leaves the fact that not all mediations are going to be successful. It leaves the fact that it may be, during the mediation process or during the investigation or during whatever, other items may come out, and it may call for criminal action. It may call for some other type of process, once something's come out of mediation. And I think that the process itself isn't what's in question, but the end result of the process. So I kind of like this sentence.
The problem I have with 3 is I understand that we may not come to a resolution, but you're saying that it's agreed resolution. So I'm assuming in part that this is for people who may be interested in the process to see what it is that happens. And as I'm reading it, it's like, okay, I'll go through this, I'll have a resolution with the police officer, and it's still going to mean nothing, so why should I bother doing it?
What does that mean?
Well, what I'm thinking of is you might resolve the issue with that individual police officer, but the larger issue still exists, right? You racially profiled me. You had no reason to stop me, officer. Well, actually, there was a robbery in the area and you fit the description. Okay, the discussion is resolved, but the issue of racial profiling is still there?
But that's not what you're doing in the mediation. We can't solve the entire world's problems in what we're doing here. We can only resolve the difficulty between the officer and the citizen. So to tell them that, okay,
Go ahead.
Simon?
One thing I want to say is when people do make complaints, a lot of times they are trying to resolve the bigger issue in that one complaint. Yes, they do have the issue with that one officer, but at the same time, they are hoping that that issue as a whole is being addressed with the police.
No, I'm not disagreeing, it's just that that says that the issue that you resolve, maybe we may not pay attention
I think
to
it's
it.
a problem with the
Number
way the
three.
sentence is written. I think when it says the agreed upon resolution is a solution for that mediation alone, or something like that. I think the verbiage is not stating what I think you just said, Ursula. I mean, the result of this mediation represents this mediation alone.
I'm sorry.
I think what you may be overlooking on this, as we kind of drill down on this definition, is that this resolution is a resolution between the parties. It is not necessarily a binding resolution between the police department and the greater issue. For example, in the issue you raised, somebody may have a complaint about the way they were addressed by a particular officer, which they may be comfortable with in that resolution, may be satisfied with what happened, but there may be another issue involved that the department is not happy with. There may be something else the officer has done that does not satisfy the department, even though it may satisfy the complainant. So that resolution may be fine for the party, but it may not be fine for the department. There may be further action. So it's part of the process because the citizen's fine, but the overall decision doesn't necessarily rest with that. In other words, the citizen doesn't always have the ability to make the complaint go away. If the complaint is legitimate, even though the citizen may be satisfied, there may be departmental violations that still occur, and still have to be addressed.
So are
I
we
will say that.
is there no contention over sentence number 1 and sentence number 2? It only relates to
Well,
sentence number 3?
I think sentence number 2 is still a bit disputed because of sentence number 3. But do we have consensus on sentence 1? Okay, well, I'm gonna read it. A mediation process helps parties develop a mutual understanding and mutual accountability over a conflict. That's not reading right.
It's word to wall.
And work.
Oh, it works. Yeah.
So just
It works towards building a practical and lasting resolution. So this resolution thing might still be in conflict because it's discussion of the I'm saying that the lasting resolution phrase might still be in conflict because we're still trying to figure out what the outcome is.
Right.
You're never going to be able to determine the outcome.
Right.
The department ultimately will determine the outcome. They may be satisfied with the resolution and adopt it as is if there's no other ancillary issues. But if there are, then the resolution is still between the two parties, not necessarily between on the overall issue. I think it's still separate.
I want to raise an issue in the same line with what Mike is saying, but also what you said. Let's use the racial profiling issue. And I believe this officer did that. I'm citizen, I believe this officer did that. Yes, I do want that issue addressed with the officer, whatever the case is. But a part of it, which maybe I'm not thinking of at the time, might be, sir, ma'am, you also can, and if you feel that way, should write a letter to the superintendent addressing the issue as a whole related to the police department. That would be, you know what, that came up in the process of the mediation, but now I know I can go and write a letter to the superintendent to address my concern, which is a larger issue, whatever my larger issue with the police department maybe as a whole. And that's why you could potentially have something like that, I think.
So what you're saying is that the resolution does not limit your options for further.
Right. You might discover something in the mediation through the mediator, through the officer, through discussion that, you know what you're addressing, okay, we can only do so much here. And the person may be satisfied with the limitations or whatever that is, but they still may have something that they need to address that goes beyond that.
Or the department may have something.
And the department may have
But
something.
that's not what number 3 is saying right now.
Right.
Can I also just include something that might
And the
clarify
department would be
things a
more
little bit?
difficult. The department, my thought is, if this is confidential and this is between those two parties, unless the police department is addressing something separate and apart from this, I mean, unless the officer, and I don't even know what would happen there because everything is confidential, so I don't really see how anything would come up outside of that would be carried to the, I don't quite see that.
Well, with an outcome one of the agreed upon outcomes, for example, might be that the complainant writes a letter to the superintendent on the issue. That could be an
Yeah.
example. But what I was actually gonna say, and I wanted to make sure that people understood the source of this language. The source of this language came from the criteria that was included within this definition was agreed to by the voluntary group. And one of the pieces of criteria included avoidance of mediation outcome as determinative. And so that's where some of this language comes.
So plainly stated, that means that if the mediation doesn't result in an outcome that reflects on the officer or something?
Nope, an avoidance of mediation outcome as determinative. So,
What does that mean?
I remember, we were kind of tossing around, actually not tossing around, we were actually concerned about whether or not, like, you know, a police officer, like, Officer Glasgow, that the repercussions in the stop within that mediation. And if there's further
right,
discipline that's needed, so I think the concern was that it, you know, the entire situation doesn't completely dissolve and disappear within the mediation, that it's allowed to, you know, take up, which kind of became
Okay. I'm gonna take 2 or 3 more comments, and then I have a proposal because we're over time for this part. So let's, Mary Ellen.
Talk fast. Often in restorative practices, we don't use the word resolution because that can raise hopes that things are going to get resolved, and often they aren't. I mean, we usually use the word agreement because that's what you can accomplish in a restorative process when people talk to each other. You can like come out definitely with them agreeing on something. So I just wanted to throw that out.
I would like to suggest, to go back to Mike's point, that we go to the end of sentence 1 and go, I'll use Mary Ellen's suggestion, a practical and lasting agreement between the parties.
Yeah.
And then down in sentence 2, a mutually acceptable agreement between the parties. And then in sentence 3, the agreement between the parties does not limit either party's additional action, or something like that.
Now, let me say, as a person who might participate in that, I don't know if that's too wide open, that last statement. I'm not really sure. We probably have to talk about that a little bit. Because if the purpose of me coming into this on some level, again, this goes to what's in it for the officer who's the complainant against, certainly what's in it for the citizen as well, but if this process on whatever level is not gonna limit it to the process and the person can go and just do something else if they're not happy or whatever, then what would be the incentive for me to even participate in the process?
Well, they can't violate the agreement. I mean, the agreement stands, but either one can go beyond him to do whatever else needs to be done.
In the materials y'all picked up, there's some sample agreements from Washington DC, and in theirs, for instance, part of the agreement is you cannot pursue litigation or further disciplinary action against the officer.
That's what I'm saying, the wording,
Yeah.
even if, let's say by some chance, whatever we come up with, even if that's the case, that you can't do it, but we have something like that written up, the person would perceive that it could go beyond that, and that would just be a disincentive to participate.
Cassie, and then
Yeah,
I
I
have a
just
proposal.